Okay, good morning. What we're going to do in this little walkthrough is a Flexbox, specifically Flexbox with the order property. And so we're going to talk about how to shift things out of their default order is really what the order property is used for. And I'll go ahead and link up a quick style sheet. And now, as many of you are doing, not a big deal, but you could drag the style sheet in its own styles folder, then update the path to be in that folder. Okay. And this is an empty tag, so you could put the / there and get rid of the yellow squiggly. And that's basically the only two files we're going to need here. I'm going to start with the wrapper and maybe a header, a main, a nav, some structural tags, if you will. Not going to put too much content in here just to get the point across, and then we can kind of go into the CSS and do like a minimum height of header to be 15 viewport height, right? So that's basically 15%, if you will, of the viewable space in the browser window. And just because we want to see the header, we'll kind of do that in green, and we'll see how well green contrasts with a font color of white, maybe. And that way we can just pull this up in the browser window, and you can see this is the header. And you kind of get the feel for what we're doing here. And then the nav, minimum height, a little bit thinner, maybe 10 viewport height. Background color, yellow, color white. Maybe we'll throw the black. There we go. We got a header, we got a nav. Let's just do a main. Min height, a little bit taller. Now normally if you fill this up with content, then you don't need to do this minimum height so much, but if header is at, I don't know, let's just do 30, see how it looks. Okay, maybe we'll make main a little bit taller still. Okay, so we got, we got 50, 60, 75. Leaves, if we wanted to fill it all up, we could add up to 100. But let's just make the footer the same as height as the header. Min height 15. Background color. We kind of got like, isn't this like the Jamaican colors? Am I missing any color from the Jamaican flag? Just that's it? Well, let's just do red, sure. I don't know if red's maybe in there. And color white. Okay, so nothing to do with Flexbox yet. And really, order's not overly complex, so I don't think this is going to be a long video at all. But if we were doing mobile first, right? We might look at this using our device toolbar and say maybe at like a 500 pixels, and this could be what it would look like in mobile. So maybe we kind of look at that, and the idea is sometimes on a desktop view you want a certain order of the content, and in a mobile view you want a different order of the content. And so what we have by default is what is called normal flow. And normal flow is pretty simple. Normal flow is just top to bottom, block level elements and inline elements. And so this is what we get out of the box. All of these structural tags are block level elements. That's all that they do. Literally, that's all that they do for us. I mean, for screen readers and accessibility purposes, these elements do a little bit more, but visually on the page for us, they're just block level elements. And so by default, all of these, well, they don't have an order yet. Why don't they have an order yet? Because there's no Flexbox. In order to have order, you have to have a Flexbox. And so as we learned, a Flexbox has to have a parent and children. So you have a Flexbox being the parent, and you have the children be called the Flex items. And so in this case, I'm just going to take my wrapper and tell my wrapper to be the Flexbox. And then by default, all four of these become children. And when they become children, they all have a default order of 0. That's their default value. And so I can kind of come in here. And again, we're pretending this is mobile first styling. That's why we don't have any media queries. And I'm going to target the wrapper and display flex. And that's going to turn our block level elements into a row. And that's how Flexbox works out of the gate, is that it says, hey, take all of the children and put them in a row and kind of align them at the flex start. You can kind of see that, and then you can kind of move things around. But this isn't what we want. We kind of like the default behavior of those being block level elements. So let's change the position of the flex direction, I should say, to be a column. Okay, and that gets it back into vertical. Okay, but at least now we have a Flexbox. And that Flexbox has 4 children. And again, I really like the inspect tools because you can kind of come down in here and see that this wrapper is display flex. And of course, we can see that with our CSS. Okay, so we're getting now a little bit more. I mean, it was kind of responsive anyways because we were using some relative measurements. But now we can mess with order, right? So step 1, in order to use order, make a parent item a flex box. And so we can now change the order. Maybe in the, I don't know, maybe we want the nav to go above the header, right? And so it's pretty common in a mobile that you get what's called the cheeseburger menu, right? Where it's a little collapsible navigation button, and you click that button and it expands a vertical nav bar onto the viewport for you to click on your navigation, and then when you're not trying to navigate, you can collapse it back into the cheeseburger. And that's really common, but very commonly that's found at the top. Okay, so what you might see very commonly on a desktop, you might have a header and then the nav's underneath it, but then when you kind of collapse it down into mobile, the nav bar is going to be up at the top. Well, the first step to getting the cheeseburger is to move the nav bar up to the top. Well, that's actually pretty simple with Flexbox. With Flexbox, all of these elements all have an order of 0, which means they follow the default order or the normal flow, right? And the normal flow is just how you coded them in the HTML header, nav, main, footer. That's the theory. To move this up then, well, there's a couple ways of doing it, since we know that, this is basically going in ascending order, right? And by default, everything is 0. But if I go in here and kind of change the nav to order of -1, well, there you go. because nav is now -1, everything else is 0, and if you're going in ascending order, of course, it's going to put the smaller numbers at the top, and then the higher numbers, the lower you go. So -1 becomes nav, header, main, footer, they're all 0, so they stay in the normal flow. So that's what the order property is. The important thing here is to recognize that all 4 of these have the same parent. Okay, all 4 of these structural elements have the same parent, and if they don't have the same parent, then you're not going to be able to kind of change their order. Okay, all these are flex items, and in order to change the order, they have to be a flex item first. And so as you're getting into your labs, right, you might be asked to change the order of some elements that don't have a parent, right? So you might have to add in a parent to these elements and make that parent a flex box and get the right direction going, like I did here, and then you could start changing the order of the flex children. Okay, now if we expand that out, okay, this isn't quite done yet, because now the order kind of remains in the desktop view, right? So how would we go about fixing that to where the nav goes back underneath the header in the desktop view? Breakpoints. So as we did a little bit yesterday and the day before, we're going to add a media query at media. Okay, and I say only screen and make sure to include that space there. So since we're doing mobile first, is this maximum width or minimum width? And I'm asking because I always get them crossed.
Max.
Okay, so let's max width 600 pixels. And so let's just test this theory, and let's change maybe the footer, background hyphen color to brown. Okay, so at media only screen and max width 600 pixels. And again, intuitively, that's, yeah, the opposite of what I was thinking. So this style's, the footer is brown under 600 pixels, so it's going to be the opposite. Let's flip that around. Minimum width 600 pixels would be what I'm looking for. Maybe, maybe that's my fault. I didn't kind of say what I'm shooting for, but let's do minimum width 600 pixels. Now that footer should be red in mobile view. Whoops. Now it's red in mobile view, and then when I get up to a wider monitor, it goes brown. So, and it stop and think about it. That's what I'm not taking the time to do. Minimally 600 pixels. So this basically says 600 pixels and up. Minimally, the width is 600 pixels and up. That makes sense. Now, all I'm going to do here, instead of changing the footer to brown, I'm going to kind of go back here and target my nav, and I'm just going to overwrite the order, and I'll just put it back to 0. What that means is in a mobile view, my nav is up top, and then as soon as I break that viewport of 600 pixels wide, my nav shoots where I want it. Cool. All right, so that is your base demonstration for the order property inside of Flexbox.